Dude, we're live. Hold on. We got a better overlay than this. Hold on. We gotta do better. We can do better. There we go. We are on the Kessel Chat. We are here. Excellent. Ryan, thank you for joining me, man. This is fantastic.
I am super excited to be here. Jeff, every time we get to meet is always awesome. And the fact that we get to talk about Star Wars and comics and artwork, I'm super excited. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for being on the show. And Matt Saunders gives a huge high five. I can make that even bigger. Here, let me make that. Here, I'll make his high five look even bigger than it already is. Because Matt, I know that's exactly what you meant, was this obnoxiously large high five on the screen. Awesome. Well, everyone, thanks for joining. We appreciate you being here on the Kessel Chat with us. Matt, it is excellent to have you here. We're just trying to feed you some content, Matt, while you're at home chilling, man. We're all about the Star Wars for Matt Saunders right now. That's what we're here for.
Really excited that Matt's here too.
Absolutely.
Matt's a really good guy. Matt's a good dude. I'm really excited.
For sure,
Thank you for being here, Matt.
Dude, absolutely. Well, everybody, welcome to the Kessel Chat. Whether you're catching us live right now or on the replay, because it is the internet and you can get this on the replay later on. It's a lot of fun. On the Kessel Chat, we talk about all things Star Wars, really focused on storytelling, and we do books. I got comics here, I got books. Ryan's got books. There's so many cool things to talk about this week. But before we dive into it, you're probably wondering how there's not just me on this screen anymore, which is kind of cool. So tonight, my first guest is my friend Ryan Rose. Ryan, welcome to the show. Want to introduce yourself?
Again, like I said, I'm really excited. When I found out you were doing this show, one, I wanted to watch it, but then I also wanted to be a part of it. So I'm really excited to be able to join you. I am a huge Star Wars fan. I can Kessel Chat for days. But no joke, it is one of my favorite topics. My wife has to hear about it all the time. My kids have to hear about it. Everyone in my household's a Star Wars fan by default. So yeah, very excited to be able to talk about this today.
Excellent. Very cool, dude. Oh, I moved things. Don't move things, Jeff. Sorry, moving some things on my own screen so I can see things better over here. Yeah, dude, my wife would tell you, like, she gets a little annoyed. Sometimes she's like, just could you stop talking about Star Wars for like 5 minutes? And I'd really tried to like just bury it in my 5-year-old's head. And he gets it some of the times, but then he's like, no, Daddy, I want to do something else. I play Animal Crossing all day. It's like, dude, I love you, but can we just play something else, please? Or talk about Star Wars? Like, can we want to watch Star Wars Legos again? He's like, no, I'm good. Crap. I'm trying.
That is like exactly what it's like in my house. Like being able to talk about Star Wars, especially bringing up brand new Star Wars fans. And my kids, like generationally, we're all at different levels. Like, of course, when I was growing up, we had the original trilogy. And then when I was in high school, we had the prequel trilogy. And I was super excited about that. And then my daughters, who started to really get into Star Wars when the new sequel series came out, that has been awesome. And so we've all been able to kind of share this and like have like the movie that we like to watch. And even like on a slow weekend when there's nothing going on, you can come into my house and you might find Return of the Jedi running, or Empire, or even Attack of the Clones. That might be a controversial pick for some people, but we're fans all the way across.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. I don't, honestly, I don't think anything's controversial. If people out there have their own distinct opinions, for sure, but you know what? It's all part of the story. And, whether you love or hate whiny Anakin or not, or think it's part of the story or not, or whatever, like if we didn't have the prequel trilogy at all, we wouldn't really be talking about anything right now. Like, whether you like them or not, they advanced the story in a way that we didn't have before, and it let us have all the other stuff that we've got now. I mean, we can go back and like pick it apart all day long, but who cares? Like, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's a story. It's there for a good reason, and now we've got all this other cool new hotness, like books and legends and all kinds of other stuff out there, so...
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is like a great time for a Star Wars fan to be alive. I mean, I'm not joking around. Like, I mean, in my opinion, like, okay, when I was a kid, we had the original trilogy. We had those 2 Ewok movies.
Oh, my God, yes. With Wicket. I forgot about those. Oh my
want to say
god.
I didn't even see that. I didn't even. I saw that in a rainy day session at school where it was like, oh, like we got to put something on for the kids, and we didn't have like a lot of things. We had the action figures, we had wireframe video games, but we didn't have. We of course had the comics, which was something that was great, because the comics helped to fill things in that we didn't have stories about. Like I remember when I was when I was kind of newly inducted into Star Wars, and there's that scene in Star Wars. Of course, people say Episode 4 or A New Hope. I will always call it Star Wars. So there's a scene where Ben Kenobi is kind of like kind of leans back and he's I was a Jedi like your father. And he tells that story of the dark times, and that was always one of those things where it's like, oh wow, like what was that, like what are these clone wars, and to be able to have that, really we only had it in the comics. We didn't have a lot of that story, and then all we had were like video games that would pop up, like Dark Forces.
Oh man.
Or novel series, like with Kyle Katarn, and that to me was like all that we had. So now to have a wealth, Jeff, I'm sure you'd agree. Like this is like a great time to be able to, engage with it.
It so is, and it's I was always a big Star Wars fan, but I didn't really get into like the comics or books until 8-9 years ago, give or take, and I started like getting into books a little bit when it was before Legends had a label that was called Legends. And I think my first real entry point into back into like wanting to understand how these stories like build out was when someone finally pointed me to Heir to the Empire. And I'm like, because I had heard the name Thrawn, and I just had never read it. I didn't know anything about it, but I didn't know who he was. I didn't really get it. I'd seen this picture. I'm like, oh, okay. And someone's like, you gotta check out Heir to the Empire. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. And I wasn't at a point a few years, that many years ago that I was like picking up books again. I just wasn't good at like having the patience to sit down and actually read a book. So instead, I bought the audiobook, and I was listening to it. And I'm like, how did I not find this before? And it took me, I think, probably 4 days to get through all 3 audiobooks. And that's 45 hours of content. And I could not stop. Everything that I was doing, driving to customer sites and when I was in sales and all these things, all I was doing was just listening to these audiobooks. And when I got done, I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, this is the most magical thing ever. And so like that started it all back up for me, and like instantly going to buy all kinds of books and comics and rewatching the movies. I rewatched like all of Clone Wars all over again. Got back into Star Wars Rebels. We could talk about it later, but I couldn't quite get into Resistance, the animated series, like the newest animated. I tried, but I couldn't.
That's what I mean. Like I feel like for a time there was only a couple of avenues, because really with every type of fandom, and I'm like a big fan across a lot of different things. Like, and you and I have talked about things like X-Men. Like I'm a huge X-Men fan. I'm a really big comic books fan. I have a lot of comics that I collect. A lot of movies, fandom movies that I get into. But it's kind of like you're engaging for a while and then you'll roll off of it. And if there was a thing that Star Wars had, which was a little hard, because it wasn't like, not to mix up my Wars and Trek, but it wasn't like Star Trek where it had movies and it had a TV, or it had a lot.
Yeah, that stuff didn't come till much later in the overall time period that we've had Star Wars. We didn't get the animated stuff until like really recently, relatively speaking.
And I just remember thinking like how if for a while if you were into the Thrawn trilogy, that was awesome, because then that was really connected with you. But those were the only things. There was just this small window of content that you could engage with. And that's why when those books would come out, like I remember when Jedi came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I gotta read this. Yeah. And I was just so hungry for that type of content. And, I remember when Shadows of the Empire came out on Nintendo 64. And I was like, oh, there's a story. There's a really cool story that happens between Empire and Jedi. Like, oh, I'm all about this. Oh, and dude, yeah. And yeah, like that's what I mean with now. you have a lot more options. So if you are into Resistance, great. If it's more into, I want to follow Clone Wars or Rebels, also great.
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of like that there's so many different
I agree.
doors that you can walk through into this.
Dude, I'm totally with you on this. Like, if you think back to, I mean, speaking of games, if you think back to KOTOR, like the first Knights of the Old Republic, and I love the style. I love that choose your own adventure style, and like, not to like get too far into it yet, but like how I loved how they took when they built Star Wars: The Old Republic, the MMO. Because I was at the time when they first released it, I was huge into World of Warcraft. I had been for years, and a few other like Dark Ages of Camelot and things like that. I'd been into some of those other MMOs, and then to see that in the Old Republic MMO, they took that choose your own adventure style gameplay and put it in there. But to your point, and more importantly, in KOTOR, they built out this whole other story where we had heard periodically or in books, you'd heard of Darth Revan, you'd heard of Malak, you'd heard of these other characters, but you didn't know anything about them. Like you said with the Clone Wars, like you hear it once and you're like, cool, what the hell is that? Like, I want to hear more about that. What is it? But that's it. That's the end of it. You don't hear it again. So then you get to play KOTOR, and like you spend a lot more time immersed in it and hearing about it and learning about it and learning these characters and getting a bit more of that backstory. You're like, wow, it's something that I absolutely adore about everything that we're getting now content-wise, like from comics to games to animated series to movies to like even the stuff that's like Lego. It seems campy, but when you watch it, you still do get an attribution to the overall story that's being built out. Whether it's campy or not doesn't matter. And Matt just threw out in the comments here, we're not the target audience for Resistance. That's okay. But you know what, Matt? You're totally right. Like, whether we are the audience or not, the fact is that does play into a much larger story and add a bunch of nuance that you don't get if you just watch the movies. It's not to say, hey, watch the movies and they're entertaining and you'll enjoy the heck out of it. I mean, yeah, forget what the internet says. Like, if you just go watch the movie, you'll be entertained and you'll have a good time with all three of the new movies. But if you want more nuance, then yeah, you can jump into Resistance, or you can jump into one of the other animated series that have happened, and you get so much more backstory that just enriches the overall tale that's going on, but you don't need it. It's like, it's not required. And I think I love that with Filoni in there now and Favreau and the others in there that are crafting all these different story weaves. For me, what it feels like is no matter who you are, you can pick one of these mediums and stick with that medium and really get something out of it and thoroughly enjoy it. And you don't have to jump into everything else if you don't want to. But if you do, oh wow, then all these other doors open up for you.
Oh, I completely agree, and I want to go off of something that Matt just said in the chat there that you were referencing there too, which is, I also and I think this is hard as a fandom because we are a very big group. Is some things they're not like, I can appreciate that certain things aren't meant for me, and that's okay. Like, I'm actually really glad that it's bringing that certain shows or comics are actually opening up doors to people that have never engaged with the Star Wars universe. And it really is a universe. And it's funny that you were talking about like KOTOR. It's funny how flat the original Star Wars is. Yeah. Like, there's just references. Like, you don't go down to Alderaan. You hear General Kenobi, you serve my father. The Clone Wars, like, there's all of these just really like small references. And even, and I know that this wasn't necessarily the case, but even like small references to things to come, like Beru saying to Owen, he's just too much like his father, and Owen saying, that's what I'm afraid of. And of course, like, that there wasn't the rest of that story there yet, but yeah. But what I mean is that there's so much depth beneath that original movie, and so the if there's a show that, hey, maybe it's not for you, maybe it is for somebody else, but it's going to get them into that world. It will. And it's a really positive world to be in. Star Wars is a timeless story. It is a story that, I feel like if there was a way to retitle the original Star Wars, A New Hope really is great, because it's a story about that. It's a story about hope. And I know that, there's a lot of people that are like, oh man, they really leaned into hope a lot in some of the later movies and some of the new stuff. But but man, that's a great story to tell. A positive outlook on the future, that you have people that are doing these really big things, that they can make a difference, small, big, otherwise robots.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's funny because my wife and I were talking about like things that inspired us when we were kids, and I was like, oh yeah, like Star Wars. Like I always want to be Luke Skywalker. And another thing that people say is, oh, there's too much merch out there, and it's like, oh no, man, I love the merch. Like when I was a kid,
yeah. I clearly am in agreement with you on that one.
no, right? Like I'm right there, man. Like it's hard for me to not buy one of these really nice lightsabers. But I like the world that you can connect with now with a lot of those things, because those were things that I would have loved as a kid. Like, and at the same time, I think that it just inspires a lot of imagination, merch or not. Like, the end of The Last Jedi is I don't spoiler alert on the end of The Last Jedi, by the way. But there is a young character that kind of lifts up a broom, and in kind of like a lightsabery way. And that was me when I was a kid. Like I had a green broomstick that was my lightsaber. And my kids have like toy lightsabers. I just think, oh wow, like this is such a really cool thing that you all have. So whether it's the comics or the television shows or the movies or even some of these merchandise like the Legos, I think it's great that there's a lot of pathways to something that I think is a really great story and something that stuck with me like my whole life. Like I love Star Wars.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's, as I've thought about this in the past, the things you just brought up, it's the whole story, the whole like universe or galaxy overall, the stories that have been told, they can bring in people for all these different reasons. Like if you are a kid and you can see yourself in a character and you can use that as to spur your imagination to do other things, fantastic. Go do that. And there's a whole genre of toys and other things that are, like you said, merch that are great for that. There's also, especially now, we've got movies like Rogue One and Solo that really, I love both of those movies. I know people have like not been a big fan of Solo in some areas, but I love both of those movies equally because for me, and this gets back to something you said in either a New Hope or like one of the, I think it was in A New Hope, Obi-Wan or somebody says, at one point, 10,000 Jedi Knights were across the galaxy, and now there's just a handful of us or something. And you think about it, and I was talking to someone the other day about this. You think about that, and the context you think of is, at the point of Rogue One, Jedi are long gone. People have heard of them, but what you think of is like, if let's just take Ben at what Obi-Wan's at his word, like maybe 10,000 Jedi existed when the Jedi Purge happened. Let's say it's 10,000. Maybe it was even higher than that, but let's say it's 10,000. Oh, yeah. If you think of how big a galaxy is, I mean, just on planet Earth alone, how many billion people are here? Then how many planets are in a galaxy? The reality is, who is likely in a galaxy to have met someone in a group where there's 10,000 of them? I mean, there's groups of 10,000 people on Earth that we'll never, ever come across and never encounter ever, let alone across an entire galaxy. And so for me, when I see like Rogue One and Solo, what you're seeing is this is what real people would deal with in a situation like that. This is what the real world is like. The Jedi stuff is fantastic. I love it. It's mystical. It's magical. It's high and above and all these things. It just seems so much fun. And it's like, oh, that feels so cool. But it's also just as heartwarming and just as connecting because when you watch Rogue One and Solo and these others like that, you can actually see yourself in that. Like you can see parts of the Jedi and you can relate to them, but you can see yourself in these other movies and the stories and what the people are actually going through because you're like, no, I had to deal with something like that. Not the same situation, but it's not magical. It's not mystical. This is just real people dealing with some real ish on a regular basis. And I love that angle about all the stories that have been coming out in the last few years too, because it really reinforces for a whole other type of audience that could watch this is like, I don't really like sci-fi, but I watch this. And you go, oh, this isn't really sci-fi. This is more of just a drama with some action and stuff in there because there aren't lightsabers and things in those movies. They're just people's stories and humans having to deal with things that are in front and like strife in front of them. And like go back and watch Rogue One and it's like, it feels like the way some parts of our world and our country have been over the last 4 or 5 years. Like, holy crap, there are so many parallels here that you can draw that forget all the Jedi stuff. Like this is just real life. It feels like.
Oh no, man, you were like singing my song. And honestly, so was Star Wars. I was born in Modesto, California. George Lucas also born in Modesto,
There you
California.
go.
It was funny because when I was growing up, I was not the nephew of moisture farmers, but I was the grandson of ranchers in the Central Valley. And you know that binary sunset scene? I swear I've had that outside of Patterson and Gustine, looking out over the coastal ridge and just thinking, "Oh my gosh, what is out there?" I remember watching those scenes from Star Wars and thinking, "That's like Tatooine is Modesto."
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to go out into the big world, and so those stories, like, they really do connect with you. And so yeah, for me, like, it was I like a good hero's journey. I like a great character that is able to kind of follow that kind of story circle path where they're given that talisman, they're introduced, to the path, the hero's journey, so to speak. Like, I like all of that kind of stuff, but for Star Wars in particular, and growing up in Modesto and knowing that things that George Lucas was saying is the same things that I was seeing, I was like, wow, like, this guy's telling a story about what it's like to leave that really small Central Valley town and go and make it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that you meet. I mean, I swear that bar in Mos Eisley, I've been at that bar. And that's kind of like the best part about this is that I think that's me growing up in Modesto, but I think that's people in a lot of different places. And again, I know that it's funny because we could talk a lot about, like, there is a lot of positivity and negativity, and there's also a lot of good critical review. Like, hey, and nothing's beyond critical review. I have my own takes on things like Rise of Skywalker and even, of course, the Phantom Menace. But the thing that I really liked about Return of the Jedi, I'm sorry, the Return of the, I love Return of the Jedi, but the thing that I really liked about The Last Jedi is that the end of the story was a lot about what, like, we're doing here, which was and I know that was a very meta reference, but I loved it, which was the story. And again, you might want to pause or head out and watch.
I need a flashpoint on my stream deck that just goes spoiler alert. I need to get that. I'll work on
that. Spoilers for Empire, everybody. Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Wait, what?
So, spoiler. The thing about Last Jedi that I liked, and it fits with what we're doing here, is a lot. The end of The Last Jedi has the young characters that they met in, like, Canto Bight. They have their little action figures of Luke Skywalker, and it is a very meta reference because suddenly Luke Skywalker, the way that those kids are talking about Luke Skywalker is the way that I would have talked about Luke Skywalker, and that they're gathering, like, hope and inspiration out of that story as characters. And I thought that is what Star Wars is about. It's a tale that is very, very old. Once upon a time, a galaxy far, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And here you've got basically the retelling of a story that we've heard before, but just in different ways and with laser swords. And so that's, like, a really great. That to me is what kind of makes the story timeless, is that it's a story that we've all heard before.
It is.
And I also really like the fact that that now we get a really great expansion of that story. Whether it is in those series. I remember one of the very first expansions that they did was there was a Star Wars Clone Wars, a very short series that was made by the people that made Samurai Jack.
Oh yeah, the anime. Oh, I only caught a little bit of that, but, like, I feel like in that series you got to see a lot more of, I feel like a lot more of what the power of some of these Jedi, specifically Jedi, were supposed to actually be. Like Mace Windu, there's a scene where like this droid ship is attacking a planet, and there's like the advanced battle droids everywhere, and this thing is like dropping down and smashing on the ground. But he lands bare hand, he loses his lightsaber, and just takes them all out by hand. And then at the end, he flips off the battlefield to a kid sitting up on a hilltop, like watching, going, "What is happening?" And he's got like a cup of water or something, and Mace just drinks it and then jumps back into the fray again. And you're like, "What just happened? Who is this guy?"
Oh no, it was like the iconic like Coke commercial. Like, I'm gonna throw my jersey back. And I actually really liked. I really enjoyed that whole series, because to me that was the first time that I was like, oh wow, like this is a canon acknowledged expansion. Like, and in fact, that's where General Grievous was introduced in that series.
Yes.
So if you came into Revenge of the Sith and you hadn't watched that series, it was like, oh, General Grievous was a brand new character.
Yep.
And he was, but it was introduced in that series. And that's kind of what I like that they're doing here, is that they're finding those areas of expansion. And that's in the television shows, it's in the comics. It's all of these things that it's like, I'd like to spend more time with this character.
Yeah.
I want to see where this is going, or what they're doing when they're not hunting down Luke Skywalker, or what they're doing when they're trying to form the New Republic. Like those are the stories that I'm interested in seeing, and I'm so glad that we finally are at a time where we have a really massive investment in all of what those stories could be, and they're bringing in some really amazing storytellers to do it. And
totally
that
agree.
has been exciting.
It reminds me a lot of what I mean. I think there's obviously, because they come out of the same house, the same mouse house now, but what they're doing with the MCU. In what Feige has been doing with the MCU, we're seeing Favreau and Filoni and all these collaborators doing on the Star Wars side, which is. And I mean, honestly, I loved everything. Not to get too far off of Star Wars for a bit, but in the MCU as an example, what has been done, and this as well as anybody else, what has been done with, you had all these movies, and the movies were fantastic, but you started to get towards the end of the movies, the end of those phases. Well, you started to get Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and some other shows that were popping in that were in the beginning. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was part of the story. It diverged eventually into its own thing. But what they're doing now that I love is like WandaVision just wrapped up. Falcon and the Winter Soldier comes out in 2 weeks, like less than 2 weeks. But I love it because it's what they're embracing, and comic books are out everywhere. What they're embracing is tell these stories from a variety of different angles. And by doing that, and coming back to Star Wars, it's the same thing. We've got now with the High Republic coming out this year, and all these authors coming together with all the different like High Republic stuff that's out there. You've got you read one of the books I had close by. One of the books, Light of the Jedi, is up here. So that was the first book that was released by Charles Soule that was out there. That was like, okay, that started the Light of the Jedi. But then if you picked up the comics that came out, it told a piece of like this story was happening, and while this was happening, it was almost like you stepped out of the main battle and stood over on a platform over here, and some other activity happened, and you could see that over here happening, but you're here. And so like the comic then was telling just another perspective of the story that's happening all around everybody. And I love that because you're injecting in these different books from different people's perspectives, but all the same stuff is happening around everybody, but you're getting it from these different perspectives, different ages, different experience levels, etc., which allows any audience of any age, of young adult, little kids, people who prefer comics, doesn't matter. You're going to get to contribute or be a part of this tale that is being told. And yes, would it be greater if you read some of these up here? Sure. But are you diminished by only reading the one thing you pick? No, not at all. You are still getting a very enriching and enjoyable story that you can connect with. It just happens to be the medium you prefer, and that's fine. I love the way that has been so well planned out, and they're even still drawing on a lot of things, that lessons learned and things they did with the Star Wars we've all known and loved for the whole Luke Skywalker sort of manifestations of everything that have been going on, Clone Wars and Rebels and everything. All that is still being developed, and it is still growing. We had the Mandalorian and things that are happening there. Ahsoka's getting her own show, and we've got a couple other shows that are coming out here. So all these things are happening. They all do contribute to the larger bit. But if you took any one of them, like The Mandalorian, I think is one of my favorite examples. It's an awesome show, but I think it's awesome for like just this hugely nuanced set of reasons. And one of my favorite is if you watch season 1, you don't need to know a damn thing about Star Wars. You can come into that and literally it's got this like classic samurai wandering, Ronin sort of tale, cowboy spaghetti western sort of thing, monster of the week, like reminiscent of like a Scooby-Doo sort of vibe. But it's entertaining. You can just watch the first season, 25-minute episodes, you're done. And wow, that was just that was just fun to watch. And it's not magical, it's not crazy sci-fi, it's just enjoyable TV with great artwork, great lighting, good story, awesome. And then when you move into season 2, of course, then you start to get the bigger picture, which is how typical serial shows usually work, and you can start learning more and more and more. But even when they introduce characters like Ahsoka and Thrawn gets name dropped, it's like, ooh, what was that? Like you hear the name, but like, wait, was that important? Oh, well then talk about it again. Okay, so it does what good storytelling does, was it leaves you with enough hanging that you're like, I want to stick around and try to figure that out. But even the episode where you see Ahsoka, that you and I know who she is, and all of the Star Wars fans are like, oh my god, Ahsoka Tano. But if you watch that show, you're like, oh, she's a Jedi. We knew he was going to look for a Jedi, so he found a Jedi. Doesn't need to be anything more to her character for that episode to just be an amazing episode and a good part of the story. To learn later that there is a lot more to her, oh, well, that's fantastic. But anybody who was a casual viewer didn't need to know any of those things because it just followed the continuity. And it's a great TV show. We're enjoying watching it.
No, I think you actually hit it right there on the head. I'm going to ask you in a second here what your favorite episode was of the first season, because I think that season is a perfect season of television. But I think you hit it on the head, which was character. One of the things that I struggle with, especially when I go to comic book movies, is often you get a repeat of the origin story. I like that we get the origin story in The Mandalorian told in a very different way, where the origin of the origin of our main character is actually trickled in until the penultimate episode, and the Mandalorian is a creed. All of that, like kind of getting to that point, right? But it was character driven versus oh my gosh, we've got this thing that's gonna blow us all up, and we've got this thing that's gonna kill us all, like we gotta go and stop that. And that's one of those things that's like, it works to add urgency if you have characters there. But if you have the urgency of the plot, but not the characters to care about or to drive that story, you end up with stories that end up feeling very shallow, and they're exciting to watch, but they're not things that I'm like, wow, like that really stuck with me. Like The Mandalorian, that whole series from end to end stuck with me. And I mean, of course, like some of the reveals of that show were great. The rules that they set up for their characters were great. I typically don't like mystery boxes because I don't need to be sitting there. I like some mysteries. I like things to be kind of with the promise of getting there. But I don't need a mystery just to like have something there. I really
something
like
that's just kind of like strung out for a long period of time, just for the sake of stringing it out for a long time.
Exactly, and that's not to say that hasn't been done really, really well. Like I mean, J.J. Abrams has made an entire career of the mystery box, and he's done it really well in some cases. But in what I like that's coming out now, especially with The Mandalorian, and what I see they're trying to do, it's about characters, and even you look at even some of the episodes in the second season where you have the X-Wing pilots that are patrolling the Outer Rim, and you get just the sheer like weight of their task and how almost impossible it is, that they're just these like kind of ranging marshals that are out there in the wild. And some of the actor choices that they have made in bringing some people in, they just bring so much weight to these characters and the stories that they're told. So yeah, I that is where I think Star Wars is best.
Yeah,
it's character-driven stories that happen to take place in space.
I agree.
But yeah, I've got to ask you if there was one thing that you liked, one episode that stood out for you in The Mandalorian, what was that?
So it was in the first season. There's two. But to stick with the first season for a moment, the episode in the first season where I don't remember the number or the name, but it's where Mando goes to that planet. It's like a swamp, not swamp, but kind of like a forested planet. He lands, he finds a village, he gets to this village, and then a group of people are like pirates or whatever antagonizing the village. They have an old ATST walker or what have you. And so while he's there, he socializes with these people. He brings the child, Grogu, we now know Grogu, with him. And he's talking to all these people who live there. And this one woman in particular, she has a little kid, or she watches this little kid. And there's a scene where like you see him in a hut and he like lifts his helmet up to eat something, or no, he takes his helmet off and sets it down. You see it, but he's in shadow. He's in all shadow. So you know that he's just keeping an eye out. No one can really see him, what have you. In that whole episode, it came to something you just said, which is the character. And for me, it was the humanity of it. It was the show is centered around this character. And the character means something to people. People recognize him for various reasons, whether it's him personally or the Mandalorian as a race or a creed, or the bounty hunter. Like they identify him, the character, in a variety of different ways. And I love that aspect because you don't need to know who he is. You don't need to know his name. Learning his name doesn't contribute anything to the story whatsoever. Like, cool that you did it. I'm glad they did that at the end. But for me, the entire season, I'm like, I didn't need to know who his name is. He just represents a variety of things, and the humans around him that he interacts with, you don't just get to see how they live their life and how the galaxy just kind of moves on. As Stephen King would say in, the Dark Tower series, the world just kind of moved on. Things just kind of, things just moved on. It just kind of happened. For Din, though, in that series, even once he takes his helmet off, still not seeing him, for me, identifies that he is just another person who's just trying to get by, doing the thing that he knows how to do, and he's just doing the best that he can do with it. And you see his character develop throughout the entire first series of like, from I'm just a lone bounty hunter, I do my jam and I move on, to I'm a caregiver, I'm attached to this thing. And for me, I recognize you don't just turn into that in the course of 5 episodes. You were always that. The character had to have always been that. The special place was already there, but the cause didn't exist for him before. And now the cause has been put in front of him, and he's not going to hesitate to take up that mantle and go do something with it, whatever that happens to be. And in this case, his path has been laid out. He's just going to go do it. And you see that with him. He doesn't even question. He's like, it's what I got to do. This is the way. Like, I have to do this thing, and because it's needed of me, I'm the person to do it. The end. And for me, it's in our lives, it would be as human adults in the real world. That's almost like idyllic. Like, it would be so amazing to be able to say, this is just what I need to do, whether that's with your job or a passion or whatever it is. Like, I'm just going to go do this thing or stop doing this thing. And just, you know what? That's just what has to be. I'm going to do that. A lot of us look at that in real life and go, man, I wish I could just not me, but like some people have to quit my job and go do this other thing that I'd really love to be doing. I'd prefer to be doing. I'm stuck here and I want to be doing this. And you know what? I'm just going to do it. It's idyllic to think that you could. We have responsibilities, so it doesn't work out that way. But to watch the show and watch him progress in that way, for me, it was like, oh, wow, that's what that could be like. This is what could happen if you just no, I'm going to do the thing I know I need to do. And you go. And, adventures or shenanigans or whatever ensues, but he just does it. And I love that about the character because, to your point, these things just happen to occur in space or occur in a galaxy far, far away. But realistically, it's almost irrelevant to the story. It just happens to be someplace else. It's not here. But that kind of doesn't matter because the story and the connection you have with the characters still resonates, and you still feel the same feels, regardless of whether it's a space opera or sci-fi or whatever label you want to put on it.
Oh, no, I completely agree. And I feel like this is an agree fest. That is an agree fest where you and I share a lot of similar opinions on this. But that's what I feel like. I like characters that kind of do. It's not about what they do. It's about who they are. Because what they do, Han Solo is a smuggler, but who he is he's a pirate with a heart of gold. Mm-hmm. Not to be cliche, but when he's packing up that money and he's like, hey, come on, you could be good in a fight, like we could use you, and Luke leaves him and he's like, I know what I'm doing, and he's conflicted, and that's what I mean. Like I liked that scene where Mando is going, he's delivered Grogu, and you get this crazy performance by Werner Herzog, who I
Oh,
think
man.
probably ad-libbed all of his lines.
Probably.
Bounty hunting is an exacting profession. All these like crazy things. Like, by the way, like my wife and I always make that joke because in that episode, I think it's like, "Would you like a libation to celebrate the end of our shared narrative?" And I was like, only Werner Herzog.
You're like, who talks like that?
Nobody talks that way. He 100% came in with his own lines.
Who do you tell? How do you tell Werner Herzog? No, sir, I'm sorry. You're gonna have to say what we wrote for you. Yeah, like that's like, no, dude, whatever you want to do, that's fine. You just do your thing, man. Oh, you want to tell me how to do this one? Yeah, that's fine too.
I feel like he was like, you put the camera over there, I'll give you gold.
I got you.
But he's in the ship. He's made the delivery. He's got his Beskar armor. His job's done. Han Solo delivered Princess Leia back to the rebellion with R2. That job's done. I can leave now. And I like how in both cases, Lando, all of these characters have that moment of what I do is not necessarily who I am, and I can be who I am. And they kind of rise to meet that challenge of being that person.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like that's that honorable thief character. It is the Ronin. It is a lot of things where it's like it is like what you said, the spaghetti westerns, the man with no name. All of those characters share a common thing, which is they have a code that they live by. Mm-hmm. And they can break a lot of rules, but they can't break that code. And that's also something that you see in some of the greatest comic book characters that are out there. And in fact, when you see them on their heel, mm-hmm. and some of those comic book characters, like a lot of comic book characters, like one of my favorites, Cyclops, when they turn on their heel, it's because they're breaking that code. Mm-hmm. And when you get to learn those characters, learn who those characters are, that's when they do make that shift. It's worth it. And as someone who likes a good story like that, that's what I want to see. I don't want to see it where it's like it's just throwaway. It's like, oh look, this person was bad and now suddenly they're good. Like that is where I'm like, I want you to earn it. And what The Mandalorian did in every episode was earn it. And I also we're not even talking about this, but I also really enjoy the practical effects.
Dude, I tell my kids we need to say that for the next episode because there's like so much in the new, the new like way they're filming these episodes that we got to talk about because it is just freaking mind blowing, for sure. Totally. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of what we usually do for the show, but that's okay because this has been such an amazing conversation. So you mentioned it in the pre-show a little bit, that I typically like to show like what's the newest thing you just got, newest piece of swag or whatever it is you just got. So do you have a recent Star Wars or comic purchase?
I do. I actually came with props.
I
was when Marvel started to publish all of the Star Wars comics, I had been hesitant to like kind of figure out where to get started. And friends of mine whose opinion I trust came to me and said, "Oh, you should really just pick up Vader 1. Pick up Star Wars Vader 1. It is definitely a great place to start. And if you like that, which we think you will, it'll be worth it." And it was. I have since picked up all of the other Vader comics, yes. Every single one and including the Dr. Aphra spinoff, because I was like, I really like these characters. Yeah. And even some of these standalones that Marvel is printing out, I enjoy them so much. The Vader series, if you're looking for something to get into, if you're someone who's like, I don't know if comics are for me, if you like reading, if you like a good graphic novel, if you like, especially now, a lot of people are homebound. I cannot recommend that Vader series enough. It is very accessible. You do not need to be up to date with all of the latest. You don't have to watch The Mandalorian or all these other things. It requires nothing of you than your attention, and it is one of my favorites. But I know you're also like getting into the comic book side of things too.
I've got a stack of them here, but I'm just going to pick one. And I have a stack of my High Republic stuff that I would love to talk about, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go classic because I have never read it. They just reprinted and reissued the Dark Empire comic. And it is a massive graphic novel. It is like, I didn't even, tons of Ralph McQuarrie art in the back. I mean, just beautiful. Let's see if we can find one here that I flipped to it just a second ago. But yeah, there's like quotes from Ralph McQuarrie, like just beautiful art from him all over the back of this book. It is gorgeous. I think the book itself is like, in the main part of the comic, let me see here, is, it doesn't even have page numbers. This thing, I'm guessing this thing is like 100 pages long. Probably. I think it's a graphic novel of all three of the books. I think there was 3 books in that series. Maybe it was just one. But this thing is, I just started reading it yesterday. It is classic. It's just a reprint of what they used to do. So the artwork and the panels are just gorgeous with this classic styling. The story in this one, if no one's actually paid attention to this one before, it's where Luke realizes that the only way to beat Palpatine is to join him. Luke becomes Palpatine's apprentice. So Sheev Palpatine being the Emperor, he becomes his apprentice, and things happen from there. So I haven't gotten far enough into it. I'm only a couple pages in because I just wanted to wait for after tonight. But dude, I am getting so far back into comics now. And like we talked about, we could spend more time talking about that, but it's just the way in which, and my geekiness right now is hugely for all the High Republic stuff. I've got a few of the issues here. The reason I'm loving it is because when they came out with the High Republic, and I've said this before in the show, is that they got all these authors, like 20-something authors or 8 or 9 authors and all kinds of contributors together for like a couple of years, and they basically just waxed poetic about what is Star Wars to you. And they just came up with, go back in time 200 years before Luke is ever even conceived or Anakin's ever born. What would the galaxy be like? What would things be? And it's called the High Republic for a reason. Like, it's the peak of everything. The Jedi are at the peak of the power. The galaxy is doing, or the Republic is doing fantastic. Like, everything is just golden. What would it be like? What kind of stories? What antagonists would exist? What sort of things would trigger? How would people behave when you could see Jedi at their best? When you can really see the Jedi operating the way everyone envisions that they're supposed to operate? What happens? How do they behave? And the nuance, even more so, because each of these books, like this run, the Star Wars High Republic Adventures, and then the Star Wars The High Republic, are 2 different lines of comics written by 2 different authors and drawn by different artists. And then the books up here are all written by different authors. Each of them a different author who all collaborated on the overall story, but all write their own books. And I love that because you get to see the voice of each author and the take on how they view that era of Star Wars in the characters that they kind of own and they write about. Others may mention them and bring in those characters to their books at some point, but they kind of go back to the original author, like, hey, how did you handle that with that character? Okay, I'll stick with that. We'll go back. We'll go do that. I love that because it creates this continuity. It creates this continuity, but it also creates a way of talking about the characters with somebody else's voice and their own backgrounds and their own level of diversity, all that.
See, I like that. And I feel like in some of my favorite comic book series, it's often done through a great collaboration of writers and authors. That to me has always been where you get some of the best stories, is when you get amazing artists and a variety of them working with a variety of writers, and you get this sometimes you just get this magic. You get some really great things out of amazing partnerships. I mean, you can look, Stan the Man and Jack King Kirby. You get some great things when you have people working together on a unified story. I'm really excited with how they're doing this. As someone who appreciates comics and how you can go about telling these stories. I like how they're doing this. I don't know who's in charge of this over there in Marvel, but kudos to them. Like, this is exactly what I would like to see. And it's one of the reasons why I'm getting back into those books. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, I love it. All right, we are nearly the end of the show. Thank you all so much for being here. Super appreciate it. Before we have everyone tell everybody where they can find you, tease something. teased it on the last couple of shows. So on the episode on March 25th, I think is what I called out, 25th or 26th, whichever Thursday that is. So this is Timothy Zahn's latest series, all about Thrawn. So he did, what's awesome is he did a trilogy 3 or 4 years ago. I forget the name of the trilogy, but it takes place where you learn about Thrawn, how he comes into the Empire, goes up through the ranks and becomes Grand Admiral. Then the second book is all about going back in time for the most part, where he first meets Anakin. And then later on, it's like a mix of he's in the book. It's like every chapter is like a meeting of Anakin, where he and Anakin during the Clone Wars interacted, and then fast forward where he and Darth Vader are sent on a mission together as Grand Admiral. And so the book plays that back and forth, and it's fascinating. And then the last book in that's called Treason, where some more Chiss come into the galaxy and into the Empire. They do something together. He gets on the Emperor's bad side, and the way the book kind of wraps is the Emperor's like, we're going to have a conversation about this thing that happened, but before that, I need you to go to Lothal and deal with some rebels on Lothal, which is the intro into his season in Star Wars Rebels. And I'm like, oh, dude, see, head explodes. But fast forward about a year ago, and he started this new series. It's called Thrawn Ascendancy. The first book is called Chaos Rising, and this takes place when Thrawn is like in his 20s, still in the Chiss Empire, way back when, and it's only stuff about in wild space in the Chiss Ascendancy. And so this is the first book. The second book comes out in a month. This is a second copy. I have a copy up here on the shelf that's mine. I'm keeping that. But for anyone watching, stay tuned. March 25th on that episode, I'm going to tell you how we can raffle this thing off, and you can win this copy of this book. I will send it to you, and you can have it. It is amazing. Hang on. Come watch the show in a couple weeks. Looking forward to seeing you. Ryan, thank you for being on the show. Where can people find you on all the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Rose. That is probably the best place to find me. I talk about a lot of things there. Obviously, I'm a big fan of comics. I'm a big fan of Star Wars. I follow a lot of different fandoms, so you'll also see me occasionally tweeting out on things. If it's not about a Star Wars movie or a new series, you might get my opinions, for example, on things like Star Trek Picard. And also Strange New Worlds. So if you're interested in talking about those things, and especially if you want to talk about comic books of any kind, I'm on there on Twitter. Really excited to talk with people about this. It's a passion.
Thanks, dude. I really appreciate you being here. Matt Saunders, thank you for sticking with us, buddy. It was awesome having you in the chat. Sujatha, thank you for being here too. Appreciate everyone who's been watching. It's been a blast. As you know, I'm going to ask it, please, if you could give a thumbs up to the video. It super helps the video on the channel. Hit the subscribe button if you want to catch more of the videos all over Jeff Bull Tech, and hit the little bell. Everyone says it. Hit the little bell, and you can get notified every time new stuff comes out. The show comes out every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. This has been awesome, Ryan. Thank you again for being here, and we are going to wrap up the Kessel Chat. Have a great night, everybody.
Hey, good night, everybody. Thanks again for having me. Bye.